Insulin resistance can be both a cause and a result of increased belly fat. And I'm sure you've heard of or maybe experienced yourself that increased belly fat can make it harder to lose weight. So we're going to talk about that connection today, and also how to improve your insulin sensitivity so you can lower your risk of heart disease, dementia, diabetes, and more, as well as try to lose some of that excess weight around the middle. So we're going to talk about ways to restructure your eating, to focus on certain things to eat and when to eat them, and other ways that you can improve your insulin sensitivity. Hi, I'm Dr. Shelley Meyer. Thanks so much for joining me on my channel. I'm so happy you're here. If you're here for the first time, welcome. And if you're coming back, welcome back. I'm so glad you're back. Please do me a favor and like, subscribe, particularly subscribe and share, and hit the bell to be notified, so that you can be notified when I post new videos. That helps the channel grow. I'm a functional medicine doctor, family doctor, and registered dietitian, and on this channel I focus on hormone health and gut health, and insulin is one of our most important hormones. It really helps our metabolism and helps our blood sugar stay controlled, and we really need it to live a happy, healthy, long life, or we need it to function well. So that's why I've been focusing on that. I focused on it in my last video. There would be another video after this that really keys into ways to improve your insulin resistance. Improve your insulin sensitivity so you can lower your insulin resistance. So let's talk more. As I talked about in my last video, insulin is a hormone that's made by our pancreas, and the way that it works is it takes blood sugar out of or glucose sugar out of our blood and puts it into our cells. And so there's only a certain amount of blood sugar or glucose in our bloodstream that our bodies can handle. It's only about a teaspoon. We're eating a lot more than that, like I was talking about in my last video, and our bodies are overwhelmed. We can't handle that much sugar in our blood, and so insulin's really working overtime. It's trying to keep up and get it out and into the cells for energy and glycogen, which is our muscle energy. But there's only so much that can go into the muscle, and when that container gets full, it overflows, and then we're either having too much of it in our bloodstream, or it's being stored as fat in our livers and in our fat cells, and we have excess fat cells which can keep just ballooning. It's like a very expanding container versus our muscle container is smaller. So that's why you see that expansion of belly fat with insulin resistance. And then the more belly fat you have, then it's like a vicious cycle where it can lead to more insulin resistance. So eventually, our pancreas is kind of getting exhausted and can't make as much of the insulin that we need, and our cells aren't even being able to be receptive to that insulin. So we're having what we call insulin resistance. So our insulin may be high in our blood, so we're making enough at that time, at that stage, but it's not able to get where it needs to go, and then it can eventually burn out and we're not making enough, and then that can lead to different stages of diabetes. There's different stages along the way. But just because you don't have diabetes doesn't mean you don't need to pay attention to this video, because there's so many of us out there, there's many people out there that do have high blood sugars that don't get detected, or even earlier stage than that have the high insulin levels. So that can really be a proactive way of improving your health, bettering your weight, improving your belly fat, but then also avoiding diabetes, dementia, and heart disease. So by the end of this video, I'm going to give you some more practical tips to change how you're eating, change what you're eating to improve your insulin sensitivity and lose that belly fat. So let's talk about what some of the signs of insulin resistance are. And I talked about this in my last video, but I'll go over again because you may not have watched that. So signs of and symptoms of insulin resistance can be either high blood sugar or low blood sugar. So that can be in the early stages when the body's trying to deal with high blood sugar, making a lot of insulin, and then you do get that result of low blood sugar. So if you have low blood sugar, not in the clear, you need to get that checked out and figure out why it's low. Some people have other reasons for that, but insulin resistance can be one of the reasons. High blood pressure can be linked to insulin resistance. I talked about this last video, thick, dark skin on the back of the neck. I'll put a picture here called acanthosis nigricans. Definitely can be linked to insulin resistance. Polycystic ovarian syndrome can be linked to insulin resistance. Hopefully, if you've been diagnosed with that, your doctor has talked to you about the insulin connection, the blood sugar connection. But if they haven't, polycystic ovarian syndrome can result in infertility. So it's often found when you're not, getting pregnant like you thought you would, and they look further and they find, high testosterone or high DHEA. And sometimes they'll do the ultrasound and see extra cysts on the ovaries. And then a lot of times you'll have irregular periods. And that is all linked to insulin resistance as well. So that's why they use one of the medications that they use for diabetes, metformin, they also use for for PCOS, because there is that link. So if you've been diagnosed with PCOS, moral of the story is get your fasting insulin checked, get your fasting blood sugar checked, and get even your average blood sugar checked, your A1C, and get that all, and your liver and triglycerides checked. Get that all, buffed up, get it normalized, and that will improve your fertility. But I'm off track here. If you feel like, especially a woman, you're getting frequent yeast infections, that could be a sign of insulin resistance and high blood sugar. If you're slow to heal, your wounds are slow to heal. If you have high bad cholesterol, LDL, or high triglycerides, fat in the blood, or low HDL, your protective cholesterol, that can be a sign of insulin resistance, so you want to look further. And if it's hard to lose weight and you have that extra belly fat, which is what this video is all about, you want to get that checked out. And like I said, you want to check out your fasting insulin with your provider. So it either can be completely fasting, like 8 hours or more, no food, or at least 2 hours after a meal, you can get your insulin checked. You want to get the fasting blood sugar is preferably 8 hours or more without a meal. So you can do that insulin and blood sugar at the same time. And then your doctor can calculate something called a HOMA-IR. I had a PDF that went with the last video that talked about all these labs that can be done and the normals for them. So I will include a link to that if you subscribe. And what else? Oh, before we move on to what else we can do about it as far as our diet and lifestyle changes, I do want to make you aware that my Trust Your Gut program to help boost your gut function and improve your digestive health is available at a much more affordable price, and I have a link in the description. And if you are interested in the connection between leaky gut and insulin resistance, check out my last video that I keep referring to, because that talks all about it. And so this course will help you improve leaky gut, and therefore decrease your risk of insulin resistance. So how do we know if we have insulin resistance? Well, I talked about that just now. You can do those tests that we talked about. And then what do you do about it is the big question here, right? So I did touch on this in the last video also, so there'll be a bit of repetition here. But, a good rule of thumb is to, and this is kind of an outdated saying, but it makes sense, eat breakfast like a prince, lunch like a peasant, and dinner like a pauper. Probably inappropriate references there, but basically eating your biggest meal in the morning, a moderate meal at lunch, and a smaller meal in the evening. Some people choose just to eat 2 meals a day, and there's evidence to that eating 2 meals a day can improve your insulin sensitivity. But there's also evidence that eating slow and not eating a lot all at once. So you can find it on either flip side of the coin there. But I don't think you should be snacking all day. I'm not saying that. But so either the 2 or 3 meals, but the biggest one in the morning. And you want your, good fiber, dense carbohydrate in the morning. So like I was saying last time, you can do a good high quality oatmeal as long as it was a really high fiber content. You got to read those labels. And speaking of reading those labels, that rule that I do mention here often is that 10-to-1 ratio. So 1 gram of fiber for every 10 grams of carbs. The higher that fiber number is and the lower that carb number is on your label, the better that product is for your blood sugar and therefore your insulin sensitivity. So using that 10-to-1 ratio is a good marker for picking, a food to eat as part of this larger breakfast meal. And you could use an Ezekiel bread, something like that. It's really thick, dense bread. You don't have to have a bread or an oatmeal in the morning, but if you're going to have carbs that day, which everybody needs some, it could be a high density or a high fiber fruit, which is lower in sugar, like berries, pomegranates, seeds, even like an apple with the skin, citrus with the fiber in it. if you're going to, eat carbohydrates in the day, eat most of them, or not most of them, but eat 40 to 50% of your daily intake in the morning. So you're going to have a more carbohydrate and more protein dense meal in the morning, because your body, when the sun comes up, that's the circadian rhythm. That's when you're most sensitive to your insulin. So you should be eating more of your carbohydrates in the morning. You should be eating a bigger meal in the morning, and you should be eating more of your protein in the morning, because the body at that time when the sun comes out, it's seeking more of those amino acids, and it's really wanting to get a complete meal then. And then you're more active, usually in the beginning of your day. Of course, there's people that work night shift and different circadian rhythms, and that's not always the healthiest for them. So we don't really want to, shift the eating necessarily to mimic that if you're not working that way, or functioning that way. But if you are, then you can make make adjustments. But I'm talking to the not normal, but I'm talking to the more common daily kind of circadian patterns of when the sun comes out, we start to be active, we start to search for food, and that's when we should eat the most of our amino acids, which are in proteins, and our carbohydrates. And then so what I would say is, if you are having carbohydrates in the morning, you want to keep it around 30 grams or less. You don't want too many carbohydrates in the morning, but you do want like half your day in the morning, almost half, 40 to 50% of your carbs in the morning. So if you do the math there, you can hear from me that I'm saying I want you to eat a lower carbohydrate diet. I don't want necessarily keto. That's fine if you do that, but I'm not saying it has to be a keto type diet, but a lower carbohydrate diet. So a total of 50, 60, 70, 75 at the most grams of carbs is a good guideline to go by. Granted, if you're a heavy athlete or a intense athlete, you're working out a lot, you're probably going to need more carbs than that. So this can't apply to everyone. And maybe if you have low blood sugar that's not associated with insulin resistance, maybe that doesn't apply to you. Maybe if you feel terrible on a low carb diet, maybe that doesn't apply to you. But it's a good rule of thumb for a lot of us. So if you're having half your carbs in the morning, that would be like 30 grams in the morning. And then you can spread the rest of them out through either your other meal or your 2 other meals. And then, like I said, as much fiber as possible in the morning. And when I say 30, or when I say 30 grams or the max of, 60, 75 grams of carbs, I'm talking net carbs. So that's another important point. You have to look, just like I said, at your total and your fiber. Your total, let's say we're using that 10-to-1 ratio. So if there's 10 grams of carb in the product that you're about to eat, and there's 1 gram of fiber, your net carbs are then 9. So you always take your total minus your fiber, and that equals your net carbs. So that's what I'm saying for that max of that lower carbohydrate diet. It's a max of the net carbs. So therefore, if you're eating high fiber foods, you're able to eat more carbs, but the net carbs is lower, if that makes sense. Let me know if there's any questions on that. So that is kind of how to structure it. And lunch would be the next biggest meal, and if you're doing 3 meals, and dinner would be the smallest. If you're just doing 2 meals a day, then I'd say, biggest in the morning, and then talking more about timing. So as I said in my last video, trying to finish your eating by 4 or 5 o'clock, preferably not after 6. Right now, I'm filming this in the fall. We haven't stopped daylight savings time, so the sun comes up at 7 in, where I live in Colorado, and then it goes down about 6:30 or 7. So we're eating with the sun coming up about 7, and hopefully, and then finishing up before the sunset. So let's say you're eating at 7 to 5 window, you're eating a 10-hour window spread out, and then you're fasting for 14 hours. So that's a good layout of a good balance there with fasting and eating. Some people do more, and that's okay. I wouldn't really necessarily always do fasting for more than 16 hours, but some people swear by it. And then if you want to do less fasting, just at least do 12 hours of fasting. So then that would be, eating at like sunrise at 7 and eating until 7 in the evening. But if you're going to do that, you want to have a really light meal in the evening, even lighter than, let's say, if you were going to finish at 4 or 5. If you have questions on that, just let me know. And again, choosing the low glycemic index foods, choosing healthy fats. So a lot of people that are on a low carb diet are on a keto diet, and keto diet can be done in a healthy way and it could be done in an unhealthy way. And a lot of us are choosing the unhealthy way. We're like loading up on animal fats. Animal fats are not good for insulin resistance and can be metabolically toxic and worsen your insulin resistance. So I'm not saying eat low fat necessarily, but because your calories have to come from something, but eat healthy fat. So avocado, nuts, seeds, or the nut butters from nuts and seeds, leaner meats that have, and poultry that have some fat on them, but not the really heavy fatty cuts. Not a ton of dairy. Like I was saying in the last video, dairy can be metabolically toxic and it's super high in that animal fat. So lowering that dairy, coconut oil is fine, is a healthy saturated fat. Some other cooking oils could be macadamia nut oil, can go to high temperatures, olive oil, olives themselves. Just some of those leaner leaner meats, but healthier fat options are good. And eat more plant-based when you can. So, fitting in some plant-based meals is better for the environment and better for you as far as your insulin response goes. So, carnivore diet might be good for fat loss, but not necessarily good for insulin resistance. Some people are going to have a problem with that, and I understand that. But studies show, and studies do back up as far as insulin sensitivity and insulin resistance, the information that I'm sharing here. And again, walk and be active, be cardiovascularly fit. Try to get in 30 minutes of cardiovascular activity or more every day. And then if you want to split that up, more is better. But if you want to split it up into 10-minute intervals of walking after your meal, that's even better because you're getting that insulin to function better. You're improving that metabolism. You're becoming more insulin sensitive. And after a meal is when you really want to stimulate that. So the walking can help. Weight training after a meal, or just weight training in general, 2 or 3 times a week, 30 minutes each time or more is really good for insulin sensitivity as well. If you have questions on any of that, please let me know. And then follow me on Instagram for more information on this at Dr. Shelley Meyer, and Facebook. And then check out the link below for information on the Trust Your Gut, which again has a more affordable price tag attached to it now. So that's a gut course that helps you improve your microbiome, reduce your bloating, abdominal pain, diarrhea, constipation. And remember to like and subscribe. That helps keep the channel going, and share out this information and hit the bell to be notified when I post a new video every week. And I'll see you next week.